Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be talking about Drive by Daniel Pink, Chapter 1. And if you have your books with you or your handout that we used in class, please take that out. On the first page, on page 9, it goes in and tells you a story about motivation. So you want to go ahead and read that. Go ahead and turn the page and look at page 10. On page 10, Pink introduces Motivation 1.0. And in order to understand Motivation 2.0, you have to first understand Motivation 1.0. So, Motivation 1.0, he begins by introducing the metaphor of the carrot and the stick. What is a carrot and a stick? Well, we all know what a carrot is, and we all know what a stick is. So cast your mind back to the time before we used cars. Before we used cars, our main mode of transportation was horses. And horses are living, breathing animals that need to be motivated. And one way that we motivate them is with a reward. And horses, like me, like carrots. So if you offer a horse a carrot, here's a little carrot, then they will in fact do what you want. Sometimes, however, when horses don't do what we want, maybe we want to punish them. And in that case, we use the stick, hence the metaphor of the carrot and the stick. This metaphor is still used today in English. In my class, for example, I have a carrot and a stick. So what might a carrot be in our class? Well, think about it. Extra credit. Is that a carrot or a stick? Well, obviously it's a carrot because it's a reward. And what happens when you come into class late? You get a big, giant Mrs. C stick across wherever you get your stick. So we have the carrot and the stick. And that's what he's talking about here. The metaphor of when you do something well or when you're being rewarded, we get this reward out here. And when we're being punished or this other external motivation is in fact a punishment, a stick. So then if we move down, here's talking about in the middle of paragraph 1, 2, 3, this is the early days of humanity. And Pink is saying that humans are basically just trying to survive. That's all we're trying to do. Motivation 1.0 is about survival. However, life is, hopefully for you and me today, more than survival. And so Pink is suggesting that this motivational model is no longer sufficient. We need a new model. We need Motivation 2.0. 2.0 then is something new. If we look down in the next two paragraphs, the main idea of Motivation 2.0 is that, and Pink says, humans are more than the sum of our biological urges. Now that doesn't mean that we don't still need the carrot and the stick. We're always going to need that, but we're more than that. We are more than the sum of our biological urges. So what do we have now? We have Motivation 2.0. And if we turn the page to page 11, you'll see at the top, and we've established here that the carrot and the stick, you rewarded the behavior that you sought and that you punished the behavior that you discouraged. That's the carrot and the stick. So 2.0, however, is similar to that, but it's a little bit different in that in paragraph, the second full body paragraph, we've got and Pink says, a crunchier carrot or a better carrot, a nicer carrot, a tastier carrot, a better reward, or wielding a sharper stick, so a more difficult or appropriate punishment. So this is another kind of punishment. This is a very good quote, what Pink says here. He says, but what this operating system or motivational system lacked in enlightenment, it made up for effectiveness. So he's saying that it was effective and it worked until it didn't because it wasn't exactly perfect. Why is that? Because life is different now. We're no longer cavemen roaming the savannas fighting dinosaurs, if cavemen actually fought dinosaurs. I don't know that there were dinosaurs with cavemen. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So here we have it, motivation 2 and motivation 2.1. However, they're not good enough. They're good, but they're not good enough. They're better than motivation 1, but they're not good enough. And Pink goes in through the rest of the chapter to explain to us the 3 problems with this motivational system. So let's look at that. If we look on page 12, he says the 3 problems are organization, thoughts, and actions. How we organize what we do. This is at the top of the page 12. How we think about what we do and how we do what we do. Organization, thoughts, and actions. Let's take these one by one. When we're looking at organization, Pink is saying basically there are 2 kinds of motivation. There is intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. What are the differences between these? What does intrinsic motivation mean? What does extrinsic motivation mean? Intrinsic motivation, very similar to the word internal, means it comes from within. It is an internal motivation, an intrinsic motivation. It comes from within me. Whereas extrinsic motivation comes from the external. It is something external. The carrot and the stick, absolutely external. There is very little intrinsic in either motivation 1 or motivation 2 or motivation 2.0, honestly. So when we're looking at how we organize things, he goes on to explain that extrinsic rewards are important. However, they are not in and of themselves as strong or as powerful as intrinsic rewards. Mrs. C can encourage you all day long to do your homework, but if you're not driven inside to do your own homework, you're not going to do the homework. I can cheer you on, I can say good job, I can yell at you, I can give you rewards, I can give you punishment. You have to have it within. You have to have intrinsic rewards. Intrinsic rewards are simply stronger than extrinsic rewards. They just are. Look here at the bottom of the page 12. He says enjoyment-based intrinsic motivation, namely how creative a person feels when working on the project, is the strongest and most persuasive driver. Internal motivation is simply stronger than external motivation. I can give you as much motivation as I can. I can encourage you with a carrot and I can punish you with a stick, but it's the internal motivation that really drives you. So how we organize ourselves is very important. While we have the extrinsic and the external, the carrot and the stick, and it does, of course, affect us, it's the intrinsic that's the most important, and this is one of the problems with Motivation 2.0. He then goes on to give a lot of business examples. You want to read through this on page 13. Then on page 14, he starts talking about how we think. And the way that we think is very similar to the same problem that we have with the way that we organize. Our internal thoughts are so much more important. Our intrinsic motivation is so much more important than our extrinsic motivation. Look at page 15 and the last full paragraph before the next section. Pink is quoting Frey, who writes, "Intrinsic motivation is of great importance for all economic activities. It is inconceivable that people are motivated solely or even mainly by external incentives. Wow, it is inconceivable that people are motivated solely or even mainly by external incentives. What does that even mean? It means that people can't be just motivated by the external. They can't be just motivated by the carrot and the stick. Mainly or at all, really. Your motivation for your actions have to come from within. They just have to. And this is Pink's argument. Now again, as with everything that we read this semester, you don't have to agree with Pink. But you have to understand this is his argument. Pink is arguing that we must have internal motivation. Motivation 1.0 and 2.0 does not provide enough or any internal intrinsic motivation, and we need that to be creative, and we need that to drive us. So that's the problem with the organization, and that's the problem with the thoughts. Moving on then to page 15 and 16, he's talking about actions. And here we have two very, very important vocabulary words that I'm going to use over and over this semester. So you want to make sure that you understand these vocabulary words. First of all, we have algorithmic. And what does algorithmic mean? An algorithmic task is one in which you follow a set of established instructions down a single pathway to one conclusion. That is, there's an algorithm for solving it. There is a task and there is a solution. A task and a solution, one solution, or maybe more than one solution, but a very specific accepted way to solve that task. This is an algorithmic task. And algorithmic tasks are everywhere, and we have a lot of algorithmic tasks, and they're very important. They're a very important part of life. And then we have the heuristic tasks. And what does heuristic mean? If we look at the bottom of page 15, a heuristic task is the opposite of an algorithmic task. No algorithm exists for it. You have to experiment with possibilities and devise a novel solution. You have to create something new. A heuristic task. Algorithmic and heuristic. So let's think about writing. When we think about grammar, when we think about subject-verb agreement is an algorithmic task. Your subject and your verb must agree. He goes. That is algorithmic. There is one solution. Simple, present, third person, he takes an S. He goes. One solution. You add third person S to the word go. He goes. That's it. He goes. One choice. Algorithmic. However, which of the 24 possible verb tense choices and all the modals, so 32 different verb tenses, should you choose with the pronoun he? You could see he has gone, he might have gone, he will be going. You could choose any of those. That is more heuristic. There are so many infinite possibilities. Writing, ladies and gentlemen, is heuristic and algorithmic. College, going to college, is algorithmic and heuristic. Life is both. We have to have both. We have to be able to follow instructions and be creative. And this is a problem with Motivation 2.0. It's not enough just to follow instructions. We also have to have that creativity, that internal drive. And this is the point that Pink is talking about. And we're going to be talking about this over and over this semester because a lot of the activities in our class are algorithmic, and you must follow the instructions down to a specific task, a task that I have in mind. But so many of our activities are heuristic. Now, not for a writing class, because Pink is obviously not talking about a writing class. Pink is talking about life. And he's talking about work specifically. So look on page 15. He's talking about work, Taylor is murmuring. Work, Taylor is murmuring, consists mainly of simple, not particularly interesting tasks. The only way to get people to do them is to incentivize them properly and monitor them carefully. This is extrinsic, the carrot and the stick. Because work is boring, we have to have a carrot and a stick. However, jobs today have become more complex, more interesting, and more self-directed, which means they require intrinsic motivation. So Pink here is comparing work with jobs and saying there's different. He then goes on page 16 to talk about the old kinds of jobs, the algorithmic jobs, the blue-collar jobs, the factory jobs, the just doing things over and over jobs, with the new jobs, the creative jobs, the technology jobs, and these kinds of things, and how life has changed. Modern life has changed. Here in the middle of the page, he says, this is a really good statistic. The consulting firm McKinsey & Company estimates that in the United States, only 30% of job growth now comes from algorithmic work, while 70% comes from heuristic work. What kind of career do you want? Because according to this statistic, 70% of job growth comes from heuristic. We have to be heuristic. We have to be creative. We have to have this intrinsic motivation if we're going to succeed in the future. Routine work can be outsourced or automatic. Artistic, empathic, non-routine work cannot. Algorithmic and heuristic. Intrinsic and extrinsic. These are the concepts that Pink is talking about. And very important on page 17, he's talking about being self-directed. He says, this is the first full body paragraph, they don't have bosses themselves. There's nobody to manage or motivate them. You're in college, and so you have me a little bit to manage and motivate you. But we have to learn to manage and motivate ourselves. That's what we learn in college. That's why we go to college. Yes, to get the knowledge, and yes, to learn how to study. But we learn how to study so that we can learn how to motivate ourselves. So that we can learn how to do this ourselves, so that we can drive ourselves. So this is Motivation 1.0 and 2.0 in this chapter, and it's very important. These are key concepts that we're going to be using all semester in Daniel Pink's Drive and other essays. So I encourage you to read over this chapter. Again, think about these concepts, and as always, feel free to ask any questions if you have them. Have a great day, everybody.